Welcome to Veteran State of Mind. I'm your host, Geraint Jones, and today we have a very interesting guest, a very well-travelled guest and a good friend of mine. I'm looking forward to bringing him to you guys and so you can see what he's been up to, which is pretty incredible. Before we get to that, let's get a bit of capitalism out of the way. I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Zulu Alpha Straps, veteran-owned and veteran-operated company. Picture paints 1,000 words. I mean, I am a master orator, but there's only so much I can do to do justice to these beautifully crafted straps. They come in a variety of different patterns. Wearing them myself, I've had a bunch of watch straps snap on me in the past. Zulu Alpha never let me down. If you are in the emergency services, if you are in the military, or if you just like getting out and about and getting after it, then get yourself a Zulu Alpha strap. Take good care of your timepiece and look very alley while you're doing it. Also want to say massive thank you to Combat Fuel for not only sponsoring the podcast, but for aiding my juicy gains. They got all kinds of, like, you think of a flavour, they do a protein in it. They got all kinds. I'm not a vegan, massive fan of their vegan protein shakes. Sure we've all been there where you might have had a protein shake and then you go on a date and you've got a bit of a rumbling tummy. Well, I found you can avoid all that stuff with the vegan shakes. My favourite is white chocolate. Go on and get yourself some, but don't buy the stock out because I need some for myself. And check out their new product, Optimize. It's a pre-workout for your day. It will sharpen your focus up. You will be like Stephen Hawking on Adderall. You'll be flying on this stuff. So check them out. Combat Fuel, Zulu Alpha Straps, link down in the show notes. And if you're looking for a book, well, you're going to want to get one at the end of today's podcast. You're going to want to go and get Alex's. But if you also want to add another book to your cart, then why don't you check out Escape from Kabul, written by myself and Levison Wood, who is the gentleman who put me and Alex in touch in the first place. The book is basically detailing Operation Pitin, which was the evacuation of Kabul. Everybody saw what went on there, but me and Levison were very lucky to have interviews from the soldiers on the ground, some of the decision makers up top in the political chain, Afghan refugees, evacuees, and all kinds of guests in there. Thank you for everyone who has picked up a book. Thank you for the people who have got in touch about it. It means a lot to hear from you guys on everything like that. And if you want to square us away on the podcast, why not leave a little review? If you listen on iTunes, if you could leave a review. Positive ones only, please. Don't want you bring you down my star ratings. I'm already disappointed that we fell from a 5 to a 4.9. So keep it positive, please, or just keep your reviews to yourself. And on Spotify, really easy. You just click on there, 5 stars. It'll take you 3 seconds, and it does help the podcast out. So thanks for everyone that's done those. And if you've done one on iTunes, I do believe that you can leave more recent ones. So keep them coming, please. They are appreciated. Right, that's it. Let's just get into today's podcast. Alex Bescoby is a author, he is a traveller, he is a filmmaker, and he's a lovely bloke and a friend, and I'm very, very, very happy to bring him to your guys' ears. So without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Alex Bescoby. Alex, welcome to the podcast, mate. Handsome as ever. Good to see you.
Thank you, yes. You charmer.
Yeah, mate. Mate, thanks for coming on, bro. I was going to say, you were about to say I look handsome, and then you saw how incredibly rough I'm looking today. Oh, I like to see you've got this. Is that the support that our paras?
It is. Yeah, sorry, I was just playing with it.
Yeah.
From your excellent event at the RGS a couple of weeks back. What a night that was.
Appreciate the plug, bro. It was pretty. It was a good night, mate. You were
spine tingling.
Well, and seamlessly transitioning into all things geographical and exploring. We're going to talk about your insane trip today. But before we start talking about the particulars of the trip, give people like a broad idea of who you are, where you're from, and like what where did this spark come from you to kind of go from gentleman to a gentleman explorer.
So there's something I'm getting to that last stage, learning how to be one. No, well, I'm from Manchester, grew up here, didn't travel very much when I was a kid, and I studied history at uni, and that really just kind of lit a bit of a fire. So I was just gobbling up anything I could about people traveling the world and going places I'd never been and seeing things I'd never seen, and I just had this sort of urge to quit the country, but it didn't really kick off. I was about to do my sort of thesis on local government in the UK, but I don't know why. It would have been the most boring thing in the world. But I accidentally won a scholarship to go and study history in Myanmar, in Burma. And I applied for it because I thought I'd get a free holiday in Southeast Asia. And it turned out I was the only person that applied. So I did get a free holiday in Southeast Asia, but I also had to learn intensive Burmese and learn about the history of modern Burma, which was absolutely fascinating. And I was completely captivated, ended up moving there and was living there for a long time in Yangon, in the capital, and traveling all over. And while I was out there, I worked on all sorts of things. I used to do political risk for oil companies. I was sent all over the world to some dodgy places to figure out how dangerous places were. I then worked in the aid industry, so working on conflicts everywhere from Lebanon, Syria, Kenya, and again back in Burma. And then I got a bit worn out by all that, and I just kind of wanted to focus on more warm, positive stories. And I actually just sort of fell into making my first documentary. Again, it was actually about the lost royal family of Myanmar. And I was just so blown away by the whole process of making films, particularly where you could tell a great historical story, because that was my passion. And so over the years, I sort of became a filmmaker by accident again, travel writer, but just really following my nose for anything where I could sort of jam history into travel writing. That was my real thing. So the journey we're talking about now was really the biggest thing of a sort of long series of ever expanding journeys through time. And the last Overland, as it became, was my attempt to recreate what I think is the 20th century's greatest road trip. So that's a potted history. But for me, it's anything that combines forcing history down people's throats and a good adventure is what gets me out of bed in the morning.
So, mate, let's talk a little bit about uni, because we have young listeners listening. I know a lot of people these days are probably balancing up that question about whether or not they wanted to go to uni or they want to go straight into school. Sounds like you made the most of your opportunity. So, like, really, when it came to uni, how did you go about finding things? Because obviously history, I did history myself. I mean, it's such a broad subject. Were you able to find a course that you saw had particular parts on there that were going to be interested in you, or was it something you found while you were at uni?
I was lucky in some respects because I applied to Cambridge and I didn't think I'd get in. So I actually applied. I really wanted to do some pure history, but I ended up applying for something called social and political sciences because I thought maybe no one will apply for that. And my odds of getting into Cambridge, where I really wanted to go, would have been higher. And I got in. But the beauty of that place is that you could, once you were in, sort of gerrymander your own degree to some extent. Right. And it was an amazing degree because I did all sorts of things from psychology to anthropology, philosophy, but I really just as quickly as I could focused on sort of the history of international relations and the history of political thought, and then the history of Southeast Asia. So for me, it was just, I was lucky because Cambridge forces you at the beginning to, a bit like the American system, I think, to do lots of things rather than just going straight in. And it made me realize, stuff that I'd never been exposed to before. But for me, it was always history. It was my favorite subject at school. And I found my way back to it because I think, and I still think it now, it is the most important subject. It's how we understand why the world is the way it is, how we should operate. Most of the time, whatever we're facing that feels unprecedented, we've dealt with it before in some way. And history for me is a great kind of soothing force to make you less stressed about the world, maybe a bit cynical about the world. But for me, it's the most important subject. I think someone said, like, we study history to find our place in it. It's about trying to figure out, who you are and how you connect to the rest of the world. And for me, it's just endlessly fascinating. But I loved my subject. I mean, I was probably rare. I kind of now, even more so, I do history for a living, and I probably didn't see that coming when I went there.
Yeah. So what was it in particular that drew you to, Southeast Asia in particular?
As I said, it was a complete accident. I mean, I literally got this newsletter in my inbox when I was end of my first year, and I was just reading through. It was from the department, so the history department, and it just right at the bottom, it just said, this inter-university course that you could apply for. And I sort of read the small print. It was like, what? It's like 3 months in Southeast Asia, kind of paid for. The quid pro quo being you have to learn Thai and Burmese, and you had to go to Canberra in July. I've still only been to Australia once, and it was to Canberra when it was raining. So it was everyone else was going out there essentially to party and have a great time. I ended up going there and sitting in libraries and going on these and going through universities. But actually, I just found it so fascinating because I had almost no reference point. I was dropped first into Bangkok, then into Myanmar, and it's a bit like being dropped into Klingon and Elvish. These are two languages that have they're non-Latin alphabets. They're basically the random symbols I've never seen before. They're tonal languages, so you're completely out of your depth. The whole grammar of the culture is something, it's Buddhist. I'd never met Buddhist before. The food, the temperature, the social customs, everything was just so alien. And that sense of culture shock was just absolutely exhilarating. And anybody I imagine who's goes on their first overseas trip, if they're lucky to, in their late teens or early 20s, it's just that sense of, I have never seen anything like this before. And then tied into that was something kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, was going to Yangon and seeing the old British buildings. And in my little sort of young head, with a history hat on, thinking, what the hell are they doing here? Mm-hmm. I'd learned a bit about the empire at school, a bit at uni. I'd more read about it in terms of Africa, or I'd certainly learned about India, but I had no idea that Burma was part of the British Empire before I went there.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I said at the beginning, that sort of getting a sense of your place in history, thinking, I've come all the way to the other side of the world, on this massive journey to basically bump into a load of the debris of people from my country being here 200 years ago. And that blew my mind. And I wanted to understand why, what were they doing here, what was their experience like, and then very quickly, what was the legacy of the colonial period. And for me, Burma, Myanmar is just endlessly fascinating because it is in so many ways, it's so sad. And, there was that thing, I guess, to summarize, what was it? It was something so alien, a part of the world, language, history, culture, but with this strong dotted line back to something I understood. Mm. And, that's why I ended up specializing in kind of the late to colonial, like post-colonial period of Southeast Asia, because it was just, you could still feel it in the tapestry around you. The legacy of Britain being there and what you see now.
I read one of the Flashman books, I think last year, and it was the one with the Burmese, the pirate fleet, like the pirate fleets and stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a British guy in there. I can't remember what he was now, but he was kind of, you probably know what I'm talking about. He was kind of credited with really kind of like bringing Burma to heel, but also like instituting a lot of fairness and, and that kind of thing in there. And obviously, like, he has his detractors in history the same as most of these characters do, because, it's, he's a colonizer.
Yeah.
But, apparently he was beloved of a lot of the people because all of a sudden they were, getting fair trials and not being murdered on a nightly basis and that kind of thing. I have to look at this guy's name for you, mate. Absolutely fascinating bloke. So it was so interesting then that you didn't actually have a kind of connection, because I was assuming that you were like, I want to go Burma because like that was your area of thing. So that just goes to show people, take a leap of faith. Sometimes you never know what comes of it. And you
absolutely follow your nose. Follow your nose.
Aren't you blacklisted from Burma now, though? aren't you on the naughty boy list?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult. Let's put it that way.
Okay, sweet. I mean, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about.
I would like to go back at some point.
Well, actually, no, before we do move on, because I think it's probably worth dropping something in about this, because it's, again, something not many people know. I saw a video the other day, horrible video, of women and children and men just in a field just getting shot at by the army there. You know, like this, it sounds like this is one of those places, like you said, this, we don't really hear about anything that's going on there. I mean, obviously Ukraine's in the news all the time for good reason and stuff, but it sounds like what's happening in Burma is like, so there's a lot of terrible things going on there. Not even underreported, just doesn't seem to be reported at all.
Well, you put your finger on something really important there. I think we as the British public, as any other public, I think we have a limited capacity for awful news from abroad. And I think we tend to put it in a kind of unconscious hierarchy of how close is it? Mm-hmm. Because I think all of us have got, will reach at some point fatigue, empathy fatigue. Like, you're not at the RGS, for your Escape from Kabul book. I had similar feelings just to point out there, how could we have forgotten this so quickly? How could we, and you saw the raw emotion in the room when they were watching those clips of Kabul airport. But we have an incredible capacity to forget. And we have incredible capacity to move on. We blame the news cycle, but we as individual consumers of the news cycle have an incredible capacity to move on because it's kind of a survival mechanism. I think if every day we tried to keep up with all the awfulness of, from around the world, which unfortunately is mostly what the news is. Okay. There's an awful lot of wonderful things out there, which, I experienced on my journey. And I came away from a long journey across the world kind of full of respect and sense of how many good people there were out there. But I think, why is Myanmar so little reported? I think it's because it's so far away, just geographically, and anything closer, Ukraine is right there. It feels European. It feels close. It feels understandable. A bit like my first experience. Burma, to most people, feels like another planet. And, we're only capable of understanding it when something utterly awful or utterly wonderful happens. Or it sort of is cartoonish and simple. Somebody bad's done somebody good and somebody good has become bad. Or I think it's a bit like a filter. The further away it is, the less time we have and the less room for care and nuance. So, Myanmar will only really appear in the news now when something particularly awful happens, which is a horrible calculus, right?
And I guess there's that thing as well of like thresholds are set, right?
Yeah.
So in America, we'll hear about a school shooting, even though they are reasonably common there, in the fact that it doesn't really, when you hear there's been a school shooting in America, you're not like, no way, that would never happen, But I guess villagers getting shot in a field in Myanmar, that bar has been raised to the point where that's like so normal now that it would take a city being wiped off the map for it to be, for it to really kind of jump out at people. But let's say something positive about Myanmar. What was your favorite? What was your favorite thing from, either a story from your time there or just something that you picked up from it that you have this? I can see the nostalgia burning in your eyes right now. So what are some of the things that you really loved about the place?
I miss it. It's a strange kind of grief to be sort of locked out. I mean, I now understand what it must feel like on a very small level to have to leave your country behind and not be able to go back.
Right.
It was a big part of my life. I had friends there. I still do. I had a career there, a home there. And to, in some ways, know that you can't go back, or you might be a while before you can go back. It is a really weird grief. And it's so easy because I had a home to come back to. I can't quite imagine what it feels like to leave your home permanently for a third country and to know that it's there, but you can't go, which is a testament to how much I was utterly delighted to be in that place. And I think, for all its troubles and its turmoil, what an incredible place. I mean, just utterly beautiful geographically. The vast majority of people that I met were unbelievably kind and hospitable. That sense of, you always get the sense of, if a Burmese person knocked on my door and asked me for a cup of tea in London, you think you're insane. Get off my doorstep. But the amount of times I just wandered around, and you can say the sense of like white privilege here, but like, people will be like, hey, come in, come and have lunch, come and eat. What are you doing here? Where are you going? Like that sense of like hospitality as a rule, which is something, the further east you go from the UK, the better it gets. But so that sense, but for me, I guess, historically speaking, I was there at a time of, now I can see it looking back, unprecedented change and openness. A country that read truly from a kind of closed off, for decades, a country that was opening itself up and people embracing all those opportunities. I was making probably the first history documentary by a foreigner in that country for decades. And people just on camera talking openly about the past in a place where the truth and the past have been so controlled by this xenophobic, military dictatorship. I felt so privileged to just be there with a camera and let people tell their stories. I learned my trade there, and I made some really beautiful like films about wonderful Burmese people, which are not going anywhere. And I'm really proud of them, and they're online. And the nicest thing is they're online. You can, and is the comments from Burmese people writing underneath saying, "This is I feel like I did a public service, I guess, in return for the amazing time I had there, was just to leave something behind, which was, here's a story about your past, and you can consume it forever." So it was, I missed it so dearly.
Where did the filmmaking then come into it? Was it just like was it something that you felt kind of compelled to do because of that, because it was under kind of represented in the world, or just, sometimes you love something, you just want to share it, where did that come from?
Well, I wanted to write a book, but because that's something I could understand. I've always written, I love writing. I've done, bits of travel journalism, and I love history. So I thought the obvious thing is I'm going to write a history book about why Burma is the way it is, and really telling the story of the colonial experience, which is what I'd specialised in. And I was interviewing the man who should be the king of Burma for this. I met him in the course of those early days. And when I was listening to him, I was just thinking, I was pinching myself, thinking, this is going to be wasted in a book that no one's going to read. What a waste. No one's going to read my book. I have no profile, no particular reason to be telling this story more than anyone else. In fact, I'm here. And I just thought, these characters are wasted on paper. They deserve to be on camera. But I had no idea. I consumed documentaries. So I was like, how hard could it be? And no sort of fatal words, but I had a really good mate called Max Jones from school. And, I literally went home to Manchester one break, and we were in the pub, and I was like, I've got this amazing story, but I think it could be a film. And he's like, well, I'll come out and have a look. So I think he was making food tube videos for Jamie Oliver. He was filming yogurt, and he's like, well, this will be more interesting. So he came back to Yangon with me, and we just filmed a few of the interviews, and it just ballooned from there. I mean, so it was a testament to the story. So the story was about the rightful royal family of Burma, which Britain had toppled and exiled to India, who'd actually snuck back in.
Standard.
And they snuck back in, and they were living sort of incognito in the suburbs of the capital city. And they'd never really told their story before. And, they were amazing. You can see it's on YouTube. You can watch it for free now. And they were just so engaging and so magnanimous about the whole thing. And I just took a camera. And anyway, the story, we won a big film prize to turn it into a proper documentary. And I never looked back from there. I just sort of learned how to do it and how to, fund them and that sort of thing. And I'm still doing it today. It's just the greatest privilege in the world when somebody will sit down in front of your camera and tell their story and let you edit it and put it out there. It's a real privilege.
or read the book, which is available by clicking on the link in the show notes. So,
someone did buy a book that I read, which is good.
So, I was going to say, mate, but no. Hey, look, I totally agree with what you're saying. Books are great, but there's a limited there's more of a limited audience than there is on the screen, and sometimes, you know, like the picture does paint a thousand words, you know. And I think what you're doing now is great, to having the two complementary, because I love then, you know, that you can have that bit of extra depth and stuff for the people that really want to get into it a little more. But I think the two kind of forms really complement each other. So where did the idea for the Last Overland come from, and what is the Last Overland?
So the Last Overland, out on Channel 4 right now, you can have the catch up, or in all good bookstores. The Last Overland is the story of my effort to recreate what you would call the 20th century's greatest road trip. And that road trip was the 1955 first Overland, it's now called. It was the first vehicular journey to successfully cross from London all the way to Singapore. And it was a pretty stunning achievement back in the 50s, you know, just 10 years after World War II. These 6 guys set out in 2 Series 1 Land Rovers, so the very first Land Rover. And they set off from London with sort of paper maps, and they were 2 decades out of date, and they drove across the world. And, you know, it took them 6 months, going large chunks of the map didn't really have sort of navigable roads. In fact, the only reason they could do it, the reason they were the first, was because nobody had been able to get further than Burma. It all comes back to Burma.
Right.
But during World War II, the Americans had bulldozed this enormous road across northern Burma, which connected India to Thailand, and finally allowed that road journey to happen. So, you know, come 1955, these guys were actually able to take this unique window of history and finally cross from London to Singapore. And the book that was written by a guy called Tim Slessor about that journey has become a sort of cult classic in the car world, First Overland. And it's this wonderful book, I think published in 1957, and it's never been out of print. And Tim is now 92, and he's still dining out on it, on that book. And it's just been translated into German. I think it's already in 5 languages. But anyway, I grew up in a family of Land Rover nuts, and I sort of always knew about the first Overland. It was always in the back of my head, and also watched this TV show in around 2005, where David Attenborough, of all people, was giving an interview about the first Overland. And it turns out that not only did this book come out, but David Attenborough, when he was a young BBC producer, had commissioned 3 films from these guys. And so there is a lovely little TV series called Traveller's Tales from the 50s, which shows this journey. So you've got this amazing book, you've got this amazing footage. And I was living in Burma, and I was researching the road that they had driven across, which is called the Stillwell Road. And I wanted to do a little project sort of recreating that section of their journey. And I ended up, through a very sort of fateful meeting a guy who had recently rediscovered one surviving Land Rover from that journey. And I said, "Oh, do you mind if I borrow it to drive across this bit of Burma?" And he said, "No, you can't, unless you do the whole thing." So I said, "Well, you know, fate sort of knocks," and you go, "Oh, okay, you know, so what, drive the whole thing from London to Singapore? All right then." And he said, "Okay, but you can't do it on your own. You're going to have to give someone a call." So he gives me the number of this man, give him a call. It turns out to be Tim Slessor, who's now 87 years old. And the proviso for me having the car was that I had to do it with Tim. So all of a sudden, I'd sort of signed up in a 65-year-old car with an 87-year-old man to drive across the world. And yeah, it all goes back to Burma, because I was just fascinated by this road and how it had connected up these two halves of the world for the first time. But fast forward to sort of August 2019, and we're actually in Singapore, because we decided to do it backwards, with Tim on the start line of the Formula One track in Singapore, getting ready to drive 13,000 miles across 23 countries in a very badly behaved, you know, almost 70-year-old car.
So, obviously, there's so much, like you covered, like you said, 13,000 miles, right? So there's a lot to go into there. But what is the kind of the, you probably got people listening right now in the security world and that kind of thing. So what was like, how did this go down with health and safety, the side of things, through places like Burma?
Yeah, I mean, Burma wasn't even the most dangerous bit, to be honest. I mean, it was interesting because it divided people into two camps, of which the world I think is divided into two camps. There were people who said, no, you couldn't possibly do that. He'll die, or the car won't make it, or you'll die. And why don't you just get on a plane? There's 12 hours or whatever, rather than 4 months. But then what I think it also winnowed out was people who recognised the story for what it was, which was this kind of defiant roar against aging. Like, why shouldn't an 87-year-old man who is, generally fit and healthy, lives on his own, looks after himself, go on a journey that, a 27-year-old man should go on? Why not? And, as Tim said, if he died in the process, then what the hell? It's better than dying, sort of falling down the stairs in Wimbledon. I mean, obviously it's different because, I would be the one that have to bury him, but it was... I never...
You won't bring him back?
Well, he said to me, he said if he died, didn't want to be repatriated. He just wanted buried wherever he fell. But, joking aside...
That's brilliant. So hang on, mate. We got to go into... Sorry, mate. Can we go into this conversation? How did the conversation about dying on the trip come around? Like, was this after experiencing some of you driving, or was it before that?
No, you know what? It was funny because Tim... What drew me to Tim, and anyone who watches the show or reads the book, he is a magnetic character. Just because he's so full of life. And he has this kind of, what's the word? Like willing ignorance of how old he is. And a reckless streak, I think, which is so wonderful. Like, it is true, in many respects, age is how old you feel. And Tim proves that. Obviously his body starts to sort of catch up with him, but it is a state of mind. And what was funny about that particular conversation is I had to initiate it. Because, he didn't bring it up. He wasn't that well, And I said, I remember saying, I was like, what would you do if I got seriously hurt or died on the journey? And he was like, the expedition's bigger than any one man, Alex. We'd probably just leave you and carry on. I was like, yeah, fair enough. Stoic 1950s attitude. This boy had fought in Malaya, age 19, against...
he did? Wow.
Yeah, against the communist insurgents. So, you forget, when he drove from London to Singapore, age 21, he'd already been in a war.
Right.
He'd already been fighting in Singapore. He'd been sent to Australia as a kid. He was evacuated, in the 40s, but then in the 50s was sent to fight in Malaya. These massive distances didn't really spook him as a young man, but yeah. So I said to him, what would you do what do we do if you die? And he said, don't take my body back to Putney. There's no point. And it was this rallying cry that he had. Sort of give it a go before it's too late. And I think that's true for all of us. Like, time marches on so quickly. And, for me, all of my films and projects have in some way revolved around people in their 80s, 90s, or even in their hundreds. And I think that's partly because I'm just so fascinated by the perspective of the elderly.
Right. So
you've made it to the top of the mountain or the end of the race, whatever you want to call it. What have you got to tell me who's still, hopefully, still in the first half of the race? What should I know? And obviously most of it is you're going to have to figure out yourself, son. But I do love to listen to people of that generation, of that age, because their perspective is so valuable for the rest of us. So yeah, we did discuss it. But luckily he didn't die. He has turned almost 92.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But it was, the last Overland, really, the reason why it went anywhere was because people just heard Tim saying this stuff and went, yeah, then why not? And I felt privileged to be able to enable that. I was very clear that I didn't want to enable if it was either against the advice of his doctors or his family, but, you know, his doctors signed him off and his family sort of said, well, you know, he's going to do whatever he wants anyway. So, and I think as a model for growing old, I couldn't think of any better.
Mate, when was this? When did you actually do the trip? Is it pre or post pandemic?
I said just before the pandemic. So we got home. We set off on August 25th, 2019, and we got home December 14th, 2020.
Right.
You know, I remember, you know, all of us think back to how we felt in January 2020. You know, I had a year of travel like you wouldn't believe. I was booking flights for a sort of 7-country trip that was sort of part work, part holiday, going from sort of East Africa to Southeast Asia and obviously everything changed. And, you know, I wrote the book actually during lockdown. So it was a real interesting contrast to write a book about driving across 23 countries and the freedom of travel and the freedom of movement. And then to, you know, this unprecedented restrictions on our freedom of movement and not knowing, you know, there were points when, you know, it's easy to say it now, but there are points where we didn't know if the world would ever return to normal.
I guess as well there's a pro and a con there because, you know, you and I both love to write. We also love to get out and live our lives. And I think there's definitely...
I don't know how you write books outside of a lockdown. Mate. I have no idea how you've ever finished a book. I have no idea.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, mate, it makes it a lot easier. I'll tell you that. Like, when, you know, it makes it a lot easier. So I guess in a way, like, you know, I don't want to say that it worked out because obviously it came across a lot of people, but if it was going to happen at any time, it might have been a good time for it to happen when all that stuff was fresh in your head. And because I guess as well, you know, you've just done all that traveling. It must be very hard to settle down.
Oh God, yeah.
And to put yourself into a room and stay there. So there you go. You know, so did you, like, when you came to write it, you know, a bit of a question for myself here as a, you know, a bit of a geek, but how did you decide what to leave out? Because I'm sure, like, you could have probably written a 1,000,000-word book on this. What was the process like for you of deciding what goes in and what doesn't?
I have to give a lot of credit to our mutual mate Leveson Wood here, because I sat down very early on in COVID. It was those first couple of weeks when we thought it was going to last a couple of weeks, and I said, right, I've got nothing else to do now. I have to just sit down and start writing this thing. And I sat thinking, where the hell do you start? And I remember Lev sat me down on Zoom and was like, right, you know, this is one way of approaching a story. And it's, you know, the idea of the monomyth and, you know, the hero's journey. And there are many ways to tell a story. But there are certain ways which are more effective at getting across what is a very straightforward story about a journey. You know, if anything, you know, if you're going to pick a story, a book to start with, pick a journey story. It's got a beginning and it's got an end. You know, as someone who's never written a book before, thank God I started with that. Like, people who write, you know, I know you write fiction. I don't understand. Like, everything's on the table. At least I knew that I had so many words and so many chapters, and I could at least do it that way. But yeah, if it wasn't for Lev, I would have got very lost. But I think, and you know this, I mean, you know, but it never turns out how you thought it would at the start. And I think I had a luxury of time really to think about it because I had nothing else to do. And I would just walk during lockdown. I walked and walked and walked, and I'd write in the morning and I'd walk in the afternoon and like, you know, sit with a beer outside somewhere before the police moved me on. And it was so interesting how, yeah, but, you know, it's so interesting how just the ideas would come at all times of day. And you'd be like, actually, no, I don't want to say that. I do want to say this. And in a way, doing it in lockdown gave me a whole new perspective on what travel was for. You know, because if I'd written it in that crazy nil that I'd planned to be in. It would have just been like, well, I'm on to the next thing. It's just, you take it for granted. But writing about a journey when you might never go on another journey gives it a real sense of poignancy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for me, also, the fundamental question was just like, when you stop, it makes you confront why you did it. And you ask me like, why did I do it? I can give you long answers, but the short answer is that I just wanted to live a big life. And going on an adventure like this felt like a good way of spending the little time I have on Earth. That was it. And there was just some sense of just like wanting to just live like in a really like expansive way. And that was the honest, selfish, egotistic answer to it all.
So I went the opposite way in lockdown, mate, and wrote a dystopian book about the total opposite of things, because I thought this is going to be the future.
To be fair, a few people are doing that, I think.
But yeah, so you know what though? I'll say in my defense that I'd actually already started writing it, but then I had in lockdown, I was like, well, this is the perfect time to finish it, because I was in America at the time, and I was like, oh, this will be cool that I'm writing this book about this dystopian future while living in a semi-dystopian present. But I mean, like, when it comes, like, I do find it really interesting though, because like you say, you got to kind of decide what you're going to like, I'm sure, you know, you got bits of everything. There's the country's history, the people, and, you know, it's, you could probably have written a book about each one of those countries that you went through. How many did you say it was? How many countries?
23.
23. Okay, then. So out of those countries, I'm not going to ask you to pick a favourite, because that wouldn't be fair. Was there any that put the EBs up you in terms of not necessarily like dangers of the place, but I mean, I'm you know, the roads in some of these places must have been, you know, let's say, you know, like, I mean, not everywhere is as well regulated as, you know, the kind of the roads that and we could, you know, like it's like in the UK.
You driven in India?
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, that's what I'm saying, mate. You have a pothole here, and it's like, oh my god. So, like, where was the most dangerous or the most difficult place to drive?
I mean, yeah, I'd say India, Northeast India, was just another level of chaos. You know, it was just all times of day and night. You are sharing the road with families, animals, you know, children, potholes that are the size of a small canyon. You know, I think someone said to me on the journey, you know, be careful driving in a country where people believe in reincarnation. It's a really good rule.
That's great.
You know what I mean? It's one foot on the gas pedal and the other in the afterlife. Yeah. But it was terrifying at times. And then, you know, so that's like human-based chaos. Then you're up in Nepal, you know, where you've got roads that just sort of disappear and thousands of feet drop, and you're driving a car that doesn't really have any working brakes. You know, that sort of just...
Sorry, mate. I'm sorry to interrupt. That's why Leveson had his bad crash, wasn't it? I think in Nepal.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like, for anyone who doesn't know, he ended up in a canyon at the bottom of one.
Horrible. It's amazing he's still alive. But no, it wasn't. I mean, I had that top of mind when I was going through, but you know, and then up in Tibet, you know, we were up above 5,000 meters, sort of driving past Everest, and you know, there it was the freezing cold. And the altitude, you know, so you drive, you know, you're driving in a car from the 50s with no insulation, no heating, no aircon. You know, what the weather is outside, it is inside. So, you know, it was minus 10, 15 at night, you know, barely above freezing during the day. It's hard going. But I'd say the place that just gave me the sort of, the creeps, I don't know what the word is for it really, but it has an outsized place in both the book and the series, is Turkmenistan. And I think it was just one of those places that I'm still struggling to get my head around. You know, this is the place that lets in fewer tourists than North Korea.
Wow.
It is this baffling dictatorship entirely fueled by endless natural gas. And the dictators of the place have been building sort of cities out of white Italian marble and, rotating golden statues of themselves and under road heating. In Turkmenistan, it was just spotless because people would go out and they would soap the roads at night. I mean, it's one of those places that even in the writing, I was still thinking, what on earth happened there? And it did actually, one of the most sort of mechanically outrageous moments happened in Turkmenistan, but I'll let people go and watch episode 3 for that because everything literally falls apart. But it is, of all the places we went, we experienced every type of government, every type of religion, culture, and that place left a mark.
What were the people like there?
It was the only place guarded, very guarded. And it had this kind of scrubbed out feel to it. Everything was very clean, very ordered, but very, slightly in the 80s. And, there's no free media at all. And, your interactions were very guarded with the people that you had, are very filtered. But I got the sense that people you met there were just actually a little bit hostile. It was the first place we went to where the fact that we were driving in this batty old car wasn't met with the kind of loving bemusement of what are you doing? What are you up to? In Turkmenistan, it was the first place we had people ask us, why? Why are you doing this? Where are your families? Where are your wives? Where do you have jobs? Who's paying for this? The idea of traveling just to travel was alien to people who frankly couldn't leave. And that was interesting because it did hold up a mirror in quite a brutal way to the kind of, what's the word? The frivolousness of going on an adventure like that. And that's one of the darkest parts, I think, of the whole. It's less so in the TV show, but certainly in my book, about this sort of lottery of movement. Just because of the passport I happen to have, I can tootle across the world in a 1950s car having an awful lot of fun. But then we were passing through, through the Middle East and through Turkey, or through Central Asia and down through Turkey, and all around you is the symbols of the great walls and fences and gates that are being built to stop people making the same journey. And it's not a debate I want to get into, but it does make it, again, holds up that mirror of a journey that I could make for fun. People and are doing and will do, die trying to make it. And that really, again, to that question of why are you doing this? it is quite a confronting question.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, it's almost like a bit of a sense of guilt that comes with that when you have these people who are essentially forever locked down.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, but it's just the great. I mean, again, this is where I guess to go back to the beginning, where history kind of at least is a soothing agent for this whole thing. It's like, well, the great tides of history will move in the other way soon. Whether soon is a 500 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. People move. That's the great profound finding I would have from the last Overland is that people have an innate desire to move. Our sedentary existence is microscopic in the great span of human existence. Us being stuck in one place it's alien to us. We follow the winds and the roads to better places. Places that are better for us and our descendants. That is what people have always done. And, it does take a 23 country journey to make you appreciate that. And, everything's going on in this country, everything's going on in Europe or in America, this sense of trying to, stop it. Very difficult. And, it's just that kind of great human urge to move, which I think we all have. I mean, it's something I reflect on a lot. Again, you had a lot of time to think, but it's funny because that urge is also countered with an urge to belong somewhere.
Mm.
I think that is the great tension that you see everywhere. It's like, well, this place is mine, and I belong here, and you don't. But now, but there are people who want to move because that is what people have always done. And it's, I think, as human beings, and I say, saying about that feeling of being locked out of Burma, people who do choose to up and come to another place, just because their life might be materially better, it must actually a lot better to soothe the feeling that you've left behind the place where you are from.
So,
there's no solution to that.
Yeah. So why is it, do you think, that some people, like you said, I think everyone seems to have a desire to some degree or another. But actually, I remember a conversation I overheard in the gym once here in Wrexham. And bear in mind, this is Wrexham we're talking about here. We're not talking about, Bartley or somewhere. And I remember two lads talking about travel, and one was like, I just don't understand why anyone would want to leave where they're from. And I kind of remember at the time, because I was, I've always had the travel bug. And I just thought, I just can't get my head around that kind of thing. So where does it come from? Do you think nature, nurture, both? Why is it that some people, like just because, there's people that like want to go for some sun, but not necessarily. Like, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who wouldn't want to leave Wrexham or Manchester if it wasn't fucking raining all the time. They probably would be quite happy. So
there's some really good push factors going on there.
So yeah, exactly. So where and they're like, this is the first weekend I've been to Manchester and not had rain. It was an incredible experience. But
it's amazing. You must be the first in 30 years.
Yeah. So when was it? Why is it? Do you think that you have this thing in you that makes you go? Do you believe it? Do you reckon there's something to do with the genetics involved, that some people are more disposed to it than others, or what?
I think we all have it. I think it's probably to a greater degree, and I think perhaps our experiences at a particular age, and particularly if it's positive. I happened to go on a great journey when I was young and had an incredibly positive experience. So like anything, it's a learned behavior, and I associate the far beyond with welcome. The idea of going to another culture, for me, has only ever been a good thing. I'm sure there are many people out there who've had the opposite experience and get burned and don't want to do it again. But I think, there's obviously an enormous amount of of just privilege going on with travel, in the sense that if you can, go and you have the freedom with your work and you have the money to do so, then obviously you can go. And some people just don't have the opportunity to. But I think the thing as I've got older, the sense, the idea of belonging somewhere that urge has got stronger. Because I've essentially been, nomadic since I was 18. I haven't lived in a place for more than a year in the same, flat or, whatever, in 17 years. And that has come naturally. But as you get older, there is a sense of envy with those who have community. And I think all of us, and again, to go back to COVID, I think one of the lessons for me was just how important tribe and community are. And, the downside of being the nomad is people form communities without you. And I think, maybe I'm moving into a phase of my life where that pull is stronger than the one to roam. I think it's, I don't think it's fixed. I don't think we're necessarily born with it. I think it's probably a sense of about the experience you have. Some people can be incredibly lonely and have never left their community. They could never left Wrexham and still be cripplingly lonely. Whereas, somebody can travel all around the world and can jump on a plane and have the means to do so and still be lonely. So I think it's about, balance. Everything in moderation, including moderation.
For anyone that's never driven an old Land Rover, explain the experience of what a day in the seat of a Land Rover driver is like.
I mean, I'm still having physio for it.
Are you really?
So, seriously.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, seriously. It's backbreaking. I mean, look, put it this way. It's got no power steering, no disc brakes, no synchronous gearbox, no aircon, no heating, barely, the windscreen wipers barely work. And, the brakes are dodgy. It's got a clutch pedal, which would put, sort of many sort of leg presses to shame. But the benefits of that, and I now understand people who love their old cars that just look uncomfortable, is that you are so present. I've just been driving. I've actually, the last few weeks, I've driven so much. I've been all over. I did a driving holiday in Europe, and I drove all around the UK, hours and hours and hours. And I was so bored because I'd listened to all the podcasts, I'd listened to all the music, and it's just dull. I don't have cruise control on this, but I had a car and I did, and it's so dull. Bring on the automated cars, because there's no joy in driving a hyper electronic machine. That there really isn't. But driving a piece of engineering from the 50s, where you have to think about everything and listen to it, and you can hear it like an instrument and play it like an instrument. And because you're concentrating, you're there, you remember, I remember almost every bloody mile because I, have to concentrate. You can't listen to podcasts. You can't daydream. You're thinking, where's the gear? Something's roaring, something's squeaking, something's humming, something's, am I in the right gear? It needs to come down a bit. The revs are too high. And if you're on a journey like the last Overland, by God, you want to be present because it's a once in a lifetime experience. It really is. So I'm grateful to that old thing that it made me be present for a long, because I have a problem with that in normal life.
I think we all do, mate. Are you telling me that you don't want to do a return leg?
Well, I mean, I am planning an even bigger one. So yeah, that's we're planning to take on the Pan American Highway.
Oh, nice.
The world's longest road, which I'm very excited about, in a 1970s Range Rover. So
I'll have to introduce you to my friend Dean, who did a lot of planning. He did. He cycled it. So he'll have I'll put you guys in touch because he'll be able to give you some good ground briefs about that place. But this is the kind of thing, though. You talk about community, and I think you've kind of found it. And I know you from Leveson, and then that kind of there is a community of those nomadic, peoples who are equally nuts, maybe like suckers for punishment.
We're all a little bit mental, aren't we? I mean, I think that's the thing. No, you're right, but it's finding your tribe is very important. It is very important. And I think to sort of end on, I mean, it is a great privilege to be able to move around with as much freedom and much joy as we do. And whether that's because of the position we're in, but also just because maybe one day, who knows, we'll be in another bloody lockdown.
Is this the path for you now? Like this is the groove now. Filmmaker, author, traveler. Have you found the groove?
I hope so. It is the greatest joy for people to continue to go on an adventure you would have gone on anyway. And also the bit that I enjoy the most. Well, two bits. One is doing it with my mates. Everybody I work with is my friend first. And I'm very lucky in that I get to build these teams and, go away and have these experiences with people that are very important to me. And, the bit afterwards, which is sharing the story, like I'm doing right now, it's the fact that you will sit and listen to me, other people might sit and listen to me talking about it and what I learned and what I found, is a great joy. It's great fun. I've met so many nice people. I've been to so many lovely places to tell this story. And I think we are, at base, we're kind of just little storytelling monkeys, really, aren't we? We love a good story.
We do indeed, mate. And I'm sure people are going to want to go and check out the show and check out the book. I will link it up in the show notes, but for those people who are too lazy to scroll down their phones, can you tell them where they can find you, mate? Where they can find you online, where they can find the show?
Yeah, well, I'm on all the social medias, sort of at Alex Bescoby. And And for those in the UK, you can watch it on All 4, so the catch-up of Channel 4. Search for The Last Overland. It's out on SBS in Australia. I think it's on Canal Plus in France. It's coming out all over the Middle East and North Africa. It's coming out in Asia in the autumn. Slowly makes around the world. The book, you can get it any good bookstore, even Amazon, obviously. You get it on the audiobooks. It's all out there. So yeah, get in touch. Let me know what you think. I love to hear what people think of the book and everything. So let me know.
Did you do the audiobook?
I did, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. How did you find I was always interested in knowing people's audiobook reading
I
experience.
lost my voice on day one.
So
back.
is the rest just white noise?
Yeah, it's just me. Yeah, so I know, but anyway, I hope people enjoy the story, because as much as I did making it and writing it and filming it, then editing it.
There's a lot of work that goes into this, but pays off. Congratulations on how well the book's been doing and stuff, mate. It's really awesome, and I'm looking forward to having you back on after your Pan American trip, mate. We'll debrief on that one.
Hey man, see you in 2024.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thanks for coming on, mate. I'll catch you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, mate. Ta-ra.
Pleasure, mate.